I spent 5 hours preparing my daughter-in-law Amanda's birthday feast in my own kitchen. The table was set with my wife's china when Amanda appeared. "Get out of here. I didn't invite you," she growled when I tried to take a seat. 30 pairs of eyes watched as humiliation washed over me. This was my house, built with my hands. I slowly stood, walked to the door, and did something that changed our family forever. The morning of Amanda's 34th birthday had started with such promise. I woke at 4:30, excited to prepare a special celebration for her. Despite our differences, I believed family should support each other, especially on important days. My son Jack had mentioned her favorite dishes in passing, and I'd spent days gathering recipes and ingredients to make everything perfect. My name is Randy Miller, 68 years old, and retired from a 40-year career as a construction foreman. These hands built bridges across 3 states, but nothing made me prouder than the 2-story colonial I constructed for my family 30 years ago. Every nail, every board, every shingle represents a memory. I can still hear my late wife Laura laughing as we argued over the kitchen layout, her eyes crinkling at the corners when I finally admitted she was right about the bay window placement. Laura passed away from breast cancer 7 years ago. The treatments were brutal, but she never complained, not even toward the end when the pain medications barely touched her suffering. I nursed her through every moment, sleeping in a chair beside our bed for 6 months. After she died, the house felt impossibly empty. Every room echoed with her absence. When Jack brought Amanda home 5 years ago, I thought my prayers had been answered. She was beautiful, smart, confident, everything I could want for my only son. At their wedding, I gave a toast that made even the waitstaff tear up, welcoming Amanda not as a daughter-in-law but as the daughter I never had. I meant every word. "Dad," we were thinking, Jack had said 3 years ago, perched awkwardly on the edge of my sofa like he used to sit as a teenager when he wanted to borrow the car. "With the housing market so crazy, maybe we could stay here for a while, just until we save enough for a down payment." I nearly hugged him in relief. The idea of family filling these rooms again lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. "Stay as long as you need," I told them, meaning it from the bottom of my heart. The first 6 months were everything I'd hoped. Sunday dinners around the oak table Laura and I had saved for 2 years to buy. Movie nights with Amanda introducing me to films I'd never have watched on my own. Jack working alongside me in the garage, just like when he was a boy. Then came the first hairline fractures in our happiness. Small things, barely noticeable at first. Amanda rearranging the living room without asking. Complaints about the creaking stairs that had never bothered anyone before. Suggestions that maybe I should update my wardrobe or try a new haircut. I tried to be understanding. They were young, with modern ideas and tastes. If letting Amanda paint the dining room a color Laura would have hated made them feel more at home, I could live with that. The house was just a structure after all. What mattered was the people inside it. Or that's what I told myself until the day I found the remortgage papers. I wasn't snooping, I'd never do that. I was looking for my reading glasses and opened Jack's desk drawer by mistake. The First National Bank letterhead caught my eye, along with the address of my home. I shouldn't have read further, but something made me pull out the documents. Jack owned 30% of the house. It was a gift Laura and I had given him on his 25th birthday partial ownership, with the understanding that, eventually, the property would pass entirely to him. We'd transferred the deed legally, wanting him to feel the pride of homeownership while ensuring he could never be homeless if life took a difficult turn. The papers showed he and Amanda had remortgaged his portion of the house for $150,000. They hadn't mentioned a word to me. The money had been withdrawn 3 months earlier. I sat heavily in Jack's office chair, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. Where had the money gone? They drove the same cars, wore the same clothes, took no extravagant vacations I knew of. $150,000 was no small sum, especially considering it was borrowed against the security of my home. Our home. I carefully replaced the documents exactly as I'd found them. That night at dinner, I watched them with new eyes. Jack seemed tense, checking his phone more than usual. Amanda dominated the conversation as always, talking about a promotion she was pursuing at the marketing firm where she worked. I wanted to confront them, to demand explanations, but something held me back. Perhaps a father's instinct to protect his child, even from uncomfortable truths. Maybe fear of damaging our relationship beyond repair. So I said nothing, promising myself I'd find a better time, a gentler way to address the discovery. That opportunity never came. Instead, I found something that made the remortgage papers seem almost innocent by comparison. "Randy, would you mind not using so much garlic when you cook? The whole house smells for days afterward." Amanda's complaint came during breakfast one Tuesday, her tone suggesting she was addressing a stubborn child rather than the homeowner. I nodded, spooning another bite of oatmeal into my mouth to avoid saying something I'd regret. "And the bathroom upstairs needs attention. There's mold in the shower grout that can't be healthy for anyone. I'd cleaned that bathroom 3 days ago, scrubbing every surface until my knees ached. I'll look at it again today," I promised, not wanting to start the morning with an argument. Jack kept his eyes on his phone, not even glancing up to defend me. There was a time when he would have gently redirected Amanda's criticisms, or at least acknowledged my efforts. Those days seemed increasingly distant. After they left for work, I stood in the silent kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The room had been completely transformed since Amanda moved in stainless steel appliances, replacing the reliable older models Laura had selected, open shelving where cabinet doors once hung, trendy gray paint covering the warm yellow walls my wife had loved. I ran my hand along the countertop quartz now, instead of the laminate that had served us well for decades. These changes had appeared one weekend while I was fishing with my brother Scott. I returned to find contractors finishing the installation, Amanda proudly showing off the surprise kitchen renovation they'd gifted me. I wondered now if the remortgage money had funded these unwanted improvements. It was so outdated, she'd explained when I couldn't hide my shock. "Now you'll have a modern space to enjoy in your golden years." The way she said golden years made me feel ancient, irrelevant. I'd forced a smile, thanked them for their thoughtfulness. What else could I do? Tell them I hated every sterile, impersonal inch of this showcase that had replaced the heart of my home. Laura and I had cooked thousands of meals in that kitchen, taught Jack to make pancakes at that counter, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries and promotions around that table. The kitchen was just the beginning. Slowly, systematically, every room in the house transformed to match Amanda's vision. My comfortable recliner vanished, replaced by an angular monstrosity that looked impressive but hurt my back. Laura's carefully collected antique figurines were boxed and moved to the attic, deemed too cluttered for the clean aesthetic Amanda preferred. I retreated to my bedroom and home office, the only spaces still relatively untouched by the renovation tornado. Even there, suggestions regularly appeared. "That bedspread is ancient, Randy. Let me pick something more current." Or, "Your office would get so much more light if we removed those heavy drapes." I began spending more time away from home fishing, visiting friends, volunteering at the Veterans Center downtown. Anything to avoid another cutting remark about my outdated tastes or inefficient housekeeping. When I was home, I tried to make myself useful, handling repairs, cooking meals that met Amanda's exacting standards, keeping my opinions to myself. One afternoon, I returned earlier than expected from a canceled dentist appointment. The house appeared empty, but as I hung my jacket in the hall closet, I heard Amanda's voice coming from the sunroom. She must have been working from home. "It's exhausting, Jess," she was saying, her tone dramatically weary. "Living with the old man while trying to build our lives. Jack doesn't want to have kids until we have our own place, but at this rate, that'll never happen." I froze, hand still on my jacket, not meaning to eavesdrop but unable to move away. "No, we can't just buy something else. The market's insane, and Jack's tied to this place emotionally. It's all Dad built this, and Mom designed that. The best option is getting Randy into a retirement community. There's a nice one 20 minutes away." My heart pounded painfully in my chest. I'd had no idea they were discussing my future without me. "It makes perfect sense," Amanda continued. "He's getting older, the stairs are already a challenge, and this house is way too big for one person. We'd be doing him a favor, really. Jack's struggling with the idea, but I'm working on him. Give me 6 months, and I bet we can push the old man into retirement living. Then we can properly update this place and make it ours." I backed away silently, returning to the front door. I opened and closed it loudly, calling out "I'm home," as if I'd just arrived. By the time I reached the sunroom, Amanda was ending her call, greeting me with a smile that now seemed calculated rather than warm. That night, I lay awake long past midnight, Amanda's words echoing in my mind. Push the old man into retirement living. Was I truly such a burden? Had I outstayed my welcome in my own home? The worst part was Jack's apparent involvement in these discussions. My son, whom I'd loved and supported through every stage of life, was struggling with the idea but not rejecting it outright. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd experienced. The next morning, I watched them over breakfast with new awareness. Every smile, every casual question about my plans for the day took on sinister undertones. Were they assessing how easily I could be removed from the equation, calculating the market value of my absence? "Dad, everything okay? You're quieter than usual," Jack asked, finally glancing up from his eternal phone screen. I forced a smile. Just thinking about the day ahead. Nothing important. But everything had changed, and there was no going back to the comfortable illusion that we were a happy family sharing a home. I needed to protect myself and the house that contained not just my memories but my financial security. That afternoon, I made an appointment with my lawyer. What I discovered next would make even this painful revelation seem minor by comparison. "Randy, we're planning a barbecue this weekend for some friends from work," Amanda announced on Thursday evening, not looking up from her laptop. "Nothing fancy, just a casual get-together." I nodded, used to these declarations that masqueraded as discussions. "Sounds nice. What can I do to help?" "Actually," she hesitated, exchanging a quick glance with Jack. "We were thinking it might be better if you weren't around. These are younger colleagues, and we want to keep things relaxed. You understand, right?" The casual cruelty of the request stunned me. Jack at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though not enough to contradict his wife. "Sure," I managed, my voice steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. "I can visit Scott for the day. No problem at all." "Perfect!" Amanda beamed, already returning to her laptop as if the matter was settled without further thought. This wasn't the first time I'd been excluded from gatherings in my own home. Birthday parties for Amanda's friends, dinner with Jack's coworkers, even casual movie nights often came with hints that my presence wasn't required or desired. Each exclusion reinforced the message. This was no longer my home but a space I was temporarily permitted to occupy. The next morning I left before sunrise to avoid seeing them before their workday. I drove aimlessly for an hour before ending up at Laura's grave, a place I visited less frequently than I should have. The polished granite headstone was cool under my palm as I traced her name with my fingertips. "I'm failing you, sweetheart," I whispered. "The home we built together is slipping away and I don't know how to stop it." A gentle breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead Laura's favorite tree. I like to imagine it was her way of responding, of letting me know she still listened. Jack's changed, or maybe I never really knew him. The boy who cried when he accidentally broke your favorite vase is now a man who watches silently while someone pushes his father aside. I stayed for nearly 2 hours, talking to Laura about everything: the remortgage, the overheard conversation, the countless small humiliations that had become my daily existence. Speaking the truth aloud somehow made it both more real and more manageable. When I finally returned home, the house was empty. I made a simple lunch and carried it to my office, intending to catch up on correspondence. As I reached for a pen in the desk drawer, my hand brushed against a folded paper that hadn't been there before. It was a real estate agency's preliminary valuation of the house dated 3 weeks earlier. The figure made my eyebrows raise. Property values in our neighborhood had skyrocketed in recent years, but I hadn't realized just how valuable the home had become. More disturbing than the number was the header. Prepared for Jack and Amanda Miller regarding potential listing of property at 1427 Oakwood Drive. They were planning to sell my home. With shaking hands, I unfolded the second page, a rough timeline for listing, showing and potentially closing on the property by year's end. Just 4 months away. The document carefully avoided mentioning my name or my majority ownership. A casual reader would assume Jack and Amanda were the sole owners contemplating a routine sale. Had the real estate agent been deliberately misled, or was this a speculative document created before they figured out how to remove me from the equation? I carefully replaced the papers and closed the drawer. My mind raced through options, none of them pleasant. Direct confrontation would force the issue but might permanently damage my relationship with Jack. Legal action seemed extreme, though my meeting with the lawyer the previous week had confirmed my rights were solid. The house couldn't be sold without my consent, regardless of any plans they might be making. What troubled me most wasn't the practical threat I could prevent a sale, but the emotional betrayal it represented. They weren't just planning to move out, but to erase the home Laura and I had created. Every memory, every holiday, every moment of joy and sorrow these walls had witnessed would be handed over to strangers, all without a word of discussion with me. The next evening, Amanda casually mentioned she'd be having a friend over to look at the house and give some decorating advice. I nodded, saying nothing about my discovery of the real estate valuation. When the doorbell rang an hour later, I remained in my office, listening to the murmur of voices and the sound of footsteps moving methodically through each room. Curious, I stepped into the hallway just as they reached the second floor. The woman with Amanda wasn't carrying fabric swatches or paint samples, but a digital measuring device and a professional camera. Not an interior decorator, a real estate agent conducting a preliminary assessment. The master suite has excellent potential, the woman was saying. With the connected bathroom, it's exactly what today's buyers want, and this view of the backyard is a real selling point. We're thinking of removing some walls downstairs to create a more open concept before listing, Amanda replied. The current layout is very 90s. I silently retreated to my office, closing the door softly. The casual way they discussed dismantling my home, removing walls I had framed and raised with my own hands, felt like a physical blow. I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. The photographs of Laura that once graced the walls of our living room now sat in boxes in the attic, removed by Amanda 6 months ago because they brought down the vibe of the space. The built-in bookshelves where Laura's beloved mystery novel collection once stood now displayed Amanda's minimalist vases and abstract sculptures. Even the garden Laura had tenderly cultivated had been replanted with low-maintenance grasses and shrubs that required none of the loving attention she had happily provided. It wasn't just a house they were planning to sell, but the physical embodiment of a lifetime of memories. The bay window where we'd placed our Christmas tree for 25 consecutive Decembers. The back patio where Jack had taken his first steps. The kitchen island where Laura had taught our son to roll out pie crust for Thanksgiving dinner. That night, I lay awake long after Jack and Amanda had gone to bed, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the house Laura and I had poured our hearts into. Even if I prevented the sale legally, how could I continue living under this roof with people who valued it so little, who valued me so little? The next morning brought yet another discovery that would push our family crisis to its breaking point. "Dad, Amanda's birthday is next Saturday," Jack said, catching me alone in the garage where I was organizing my tools. "We're having a dinner party here. Nothing too elaborate, just family and close friends." I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. "That sounds nice. I'll make sure to get her a card and gift." Jack shifted uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. "Actually, I was hoping you might help with the dinner itself. You're a better cook than I am, and Amanda really loves your garlic roast chicken." The request surprised me. Amanda had been complaining about my cooking for months, particularly my liberal use of garlic. Yet here was Jack, suggesting I prepare the very dish she'd criticized. "Of course," I agreed, touched by the opportunity to contribute meaningfully. "I'd be happy to handle the cooking. Just let me know how many people and any dietary restrictions." "Thanks, Dad." Jack looked relieved. "About 20 people. No special diets that I know of. Amanda's been stressed about work lately, and I want her birthday to be perfect." Over the next few days, I threw myself into planning the menu. If cooking for Amanda's birthday would help repair our fractured relationship, I was willing to make the effort. I chose recipes I knew Jack had enjoyed growing up, dishes Laura had perfected over the years that I'd learned to replicate after her passing. I spent hours shopping for the freshest ingredients, selecting wines that would complement each course, even ordering a custom cake from the bakery downtown that Amanda had once mentioned liking. The day before the party, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Amanda and Jack had gone to visit her parents for lunch, giving me the perfect opportunity to vacuum, dust, and polish every surface until the place gleamed. I set the dining room table with Laura's best china and crystal glasses we'd received as wedding gifts 42 years earlier. The silverware, real silver that required regular polishing to maintain its luster, had been a gift from my parents. I worked late into the night, preparing what could be done ahead, marinating the chicken, chopping vegetables, baking 2 types of rolls from scratch. By the time I fell into bed, exhausted but satisfied, the refrigerator was packed with carefully labeled containers ready for final preparation the next day. My alarm rang at 5 in the morning on Saturday. I shuffled to the kitchen in slippers and robe, starting coffee before diving into the day's cooking marathon. The chicken needed to roast slowly to achieve the perfect tenderness. The homemade pasta for the side dish required careful attention. The appetizers, tiny pastry cups filled with seasoned crab, were delicate work for my aging fingers, but worth the effort. By noon, tantalizing aromas filled the house. I was tired but pleased with my progress. When Amanda and Jack emerged from their bedroom, I greeted them with fresh coffee and a sample of the crab pastries. "Everything smells amazing, Dad," Jack said appreciatively, popping a pastry into his mouth. "This is incredible." Amanda nodded, her expression unreadable. "The table looks nice too. Thanks for your help, Randy. I need to start getting ready. People will arrive at 4. I continued cooking through the afternoon, barely taking time to shower and change into fresh clothes before the first guests arrived. Amanda greeted them at the door, radiant in a deep blue dress, accepting gifts and compliments with practiced grace. Jack poured drinks and led people to the beautifully arranged appetizer table I had prepared. I remained in the kitchen, putting final touches on the main courses, occasionally stepping out to refill platters or clear empty glasses. No one introduced me to the guests, though a few friendly faces stopped by the kitchen to compliment the food. At 5:30, Amanda called everyone to the dining room. The table looked magnificent, candles glowing softly, crystals sparkling in the light, serving dishes arranged artfully down the center. I carried in the main attraction the garlic roast chicken, golden brown and fragrant, placing it carefully at the head of the table where Amanda would sit. "Everything is ready," I announced quietly to Jack, who nodded his thanks before guiding Amanda to her seat. I watched from the threshold as guests found their places, admiring the table setting, exclaiming over the feast laid before them. My heart swelled with quiet pride. Despite our differences, I had created something beautiful for Amanda's special day. Perhaps this could be a turning point in our relationship. As the last guest was seated, I stepped forward to take the one empty chair near the middle of the table. Before I could sit, Amanda looked up, her eyes locking with mine. The conversation around the table faltered. "Randy," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "What are you doing?" Confused, I gestured to the empty chair. "Joining you for dinner?" Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "I didn't invite you to sit with us. This dinner is for my friends and family." The words hit me like a physical blow. 20 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably between us. "Amanda," Jack started, but she cut him off with a sharp glance. "I appreciate your help with the cooking," she continued, her voice falsely sweet, "but we won't be needing anything else. In fact, it would be better if you weren't hovering around making everyone uncomfortable." The humiliation burned through me, hot and sickening. I stood frozen, one hand still on the back of the chair, aware of the pitying glances from guests who didn't know what to do. "Get out of here! I didn't invite you," she suddenly growled, dropping the pleasant facade when I didn't immediately move. "This is my birthday dinner with my friends. Nobody wants some old man hanging around ruining the vibe." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Amanda seemed shocked by her own outburst. In that terrible moment, something shifted within me. This was my house, my table, my dishes, my food. The realization came with a strange calm that replaced the initial hurt. I slowly straightened, nodding once. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the door that led to the front hallway. Behind me, conversation awkwardly resumed, someone forcing a laugh to break the tension. I paused in the hallway, considering my options. The easiest choice would be retreat, go to my room, nurse my wounds in private, perhaps call Scott to vent about this final indignity. Instead, I turned toward my office. What I did next would change our family dynamic forever. While searching for a missing recipe card in Amanda's desk that morning, I'd accidentally discovered a document open on her laptop. Normally, I would never invade someone's privacy by reading their computer files. But the header had caught my attention: Petition for Guardianship and Conservatorship. The document was a draft letter to their family attorney, detailing concerns about my declining cognitive abilities and increasingly erratic behavior. It outlined steps for Jack to obtain power of attorney over my finances and healthcare decisions, with specific mention of the family home at 1427 Oakwood Drive as an asset requiring proper management. The letter contained outright fabrications, claims that I'd left burners on, gotten lost in familiar neighborhoods, mismanaged my medications. None of these things had happened. The document was dated just 3 days earlier, suggesting this plan was actively in development. I'd been so shocked that I closed the laptop without reading further, trying to convince myself there must be some explanation besides the obvious. Perhaps I'd misunderstood. Perhaps it was research for a friend in a similar situation. But combined with everything else I'd discovered, the truth was unavoidable. Amanda wasn't just planning to push me into retirement living. She was building a case to have me declared incompetent, giving them control of my assets, including the house. Now, standing in the hallway while Amanda's birthday guests ate food I'd lovingly prepared, I made a decision. The time for silent accommodation was over. I entered the dining room again, this time with a quiet confidence that silenced conversation as effectively as Amanda's outburst had moments before. Every head turned toward me, forks pausing midway to mouths, wine glasses gently placed back on the table. Amanda's face tightened. "Randy, I thought I made myself clear." "You did," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm, perfectly clear. "But I have something to say before I go, and I believe your guests deserve to hear it." Jack half rose from his chair. "Dad, maybe this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time, son." I held his gaze until he slowly sank back down. "I've waited too long already." I looked around the table at the uncertain faces of strangers, and a few people I recognized: Amanda's parents, her sister, a couple of Jack's childhood friends. At the far end sat an elderly man I didn't know, watching the scene with surprising intensity. "My name is Randy Miller," I began. "This is my home. I designed it, built much of it with these hands, and have lived here for 30 years. The food you're eating came from recipes my late wife perfected and taught me to make. You're drinking wine from glasses Laura and I received as wedding gifts 4 decades ago." Amanda's smile had vanished completely, replaced by a tight-lipped glare. Jack looked sick. "I welcomed my son and daughter-in-law into my home 3 years ago when they needed a place to stay. I shared everything I had with them. I rearranged my life to accommodate theirs. When they redecorated without asking, removed my wife's photographs, criticized my habits, and gradually pushed me to the margins of my own home, I said nothing. The uncomfortable silence deepened. A few guests shifted in their seats, clearly wishing they could disappear. I discovered they had remortgaged part of the house without telling me. I found out they were planning to sell it out from under me. I learned they were preparing legal documents claiming I was mentally incompetent to force me into assisted living. Gasps came from several people. Amanda's mother covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide with shock. Still, I said nothing. I kept cooking, cleaning, making myself useful, hoping something would change. Tonight I spent 12 hours preparing a perfect birthday dinner for a woman who just told me to get out of my own dining room, at my own table, in front of 30 strangers. My voice remained steady, though emotions churned beneath the surface. I wasn't yelling or even speaking particularly loudly, but every word landed with unmistakable impact. I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone or ruin a celebration. I'm sharing it because the truth matters, respect matters, family matters. The elderly man at the end of the table suddenly stood up, his napkin falling unnoticed to the floor. "I've seen enough," he announced, his voice surprisingly strong for his age. "Amanda, is this how you treat the father of your husband, in his own home?" I recognized him now, Amanda's grandfather, whom I'd met briefly at their wedding. He'd seemed frail then, but now he stood tall, righteous anger evident in his bearing. "Grandpa, you don't understand," Amanda began, her composure cracking. "Randy has been increasingly difficult to live with. He's stuck in the past, refusing to adapt." "Adapt?" the old man interrupted. "From what I've observed tonight, and from what your father has told me about your living arrangement, this man has done nothing but adapt. He's accommodated your every whim while you've systematically dismantled his home and dignity." Amanda's face flushed. "That's not fair. We've made improvements to an outdated house. We've tried to help him modernize." "I'm 87 years old," her grandfather continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I know something about being treated as obsolete. I've watched how you've spoken to Randy all evening when you bothered to acknowledge him at all. I've seen how you interrupted him, dismissed his contributions, treated him like hired help rather than family." He turned to face me directly. "Sir, I owe you an apology on behalf of my granddaughter. This behavior is not what our family stands for." The room fell silent again. Amanda's face had gone from flushed to pale. Jack looked like he might be ill. I nodded my thanks to the elderly man. "I appreciate your words, sir. I think it's best if I leave you all to enjoy the meal now." As I turned to go, Amanda found her voice again. "Wait. You're making me sound terrible based on a few misunderstandings. Jack, tell them how unreasonable your father has been." All eyes shifted to Jack, who looked trapped between loyalty to his wife and the unavoidable truth of what had been happening. He began, then faltered. "For the first time in years, my son really looked at me, not through me or past me, but at me. What he saw in my face seemed to shake him. I've let this situation go too far," he finally said. "Dad has been nothing but generous, and we've taken advantage of that generosity. I'm ashamed of my part in it." Amanda's mouth opened in shock. "Jack, how can you say that? We've been carrying him for years. The constant accommodations, the financial burden." "Financial burden?" I repeated, unable to let this pass. "Amanda, I haven't taken $1 from either of you. I pay the property taxes, utilities, and maintenance costs for this house. The only financial burden has been the remortgage you took out on Jack's portion of the property, $150,000, that disappeared with nothing to show for it except a kitchen renovation I never asked for." Her eyes widened, darting to Jack. "You said he didn't know about that." The room had become uncomfortably quiet again. One guest, a young woman near the end of the table, slowly pushed back her chair and stood up. "I think I should go," she said quietly. "This seems like a family matter." Others began to murmur agreement, napkins being placed beside half-eaten meals, apologetic glances exchanged. "No, please stay," Amanda said desperately. "This is just a misunderstanding. Randy is confused about some things. We can sort this out later." I shook my head, suddenly bone-tired. "I'm not confused, Amanda. I'm finally seeing things clearly." I addressed the uncomfortable guests directly. "Please, enjoy the meal. Don't let this situation ruin your evening." With that, I walked out, heading not to my bedroom but to my office, where I retrieved a folder from my desk drawer. The contents would change everything, but first, I needed a moment to collect myself. The confrontation had left me shaking slightly, adrenaline coursing through my system. I sat heavily in my office chair, breathing deeply, listening to the muffled sounds of Amanda attempting to salvage her party. Most guests were making excuses to leave, despite her increasingly desperate attempts to normalize the situation. Jack appeared in my doorway, his face drawn with emotion. "Dad," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, son. I think it's time we had an honest conversation." "Is it true?" Jack asked as soon as he closed the door behind him. "About the guardianship documents?" I nodded. "I found them on Amanda's laptop 3 days ago. A draft letter to your attorney building a case that I'm mentally incompetent." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage years that it momentarily softened my heart. "I swear I didn't know about that, Dad. She mentioned getting power of attorney, just in case. But nothing about claiming you were incompetent. And the real estate assessment? The plans to sell the house?" His eyes couldn't meet mine. We discussed possibly selling eventually. Amanda thought it might be better for everyone if we had separate spaces. But I never agreed to anything concrete, and I certainly never planned to do it without your involvement. "The remortgage?" I pressed on. "That was." He sighed heavily. "Amanda wanted to start a side business, an online boutique. The initial investment was higher than expected, $150,000. It didn't all go to the business. Some went to her student loans, some to the kitchen renovation. The business failed within 6 months. We're still paying off the loan." I absorbed this information silently. The conversation in the dining room had clearly disrupted the delicately constructed narrative. Amanda had built not just for me but for Jack as well. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing the full picture of the decisions that had been made, the manipulations that had occurred. "I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough," Jack continued. "I should have stood up for you. I should have noticed what was happening." "Yes, you should have," I agreed quietly. There was no satisfaction in his admission, only a deep sadness for what our relationship had become. "The question is, what happens now?" Jack looked up, uncertainty plain on his face. "What do you want to happen?" I reached for the folder on my desk, removing several legal documents. After finding the guardianship letter, I contacted my attorney. These papers establish a living trust that protects my assets, including my 70% ownership of this house. No one can force me into any living situation I don't choose, regardless of health or mental status. Jack's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. This is dated last week. I've been planning for several contingencies, I explained, including the possibility that you and Amanda might try to legally remove me from my home. Dad, I would never. I held up my hand. I hope that's true, son. But I needed to protect myself, just in case. I passed him another document. This one outlines 3 options for how we proceed from here. The first is that you and Amanda move out within 30 days. I'll buy back Jack's 30% ownership at fair market value, allowing you to purchase another home. He skimmed the paper, his expression growing more troubled. Option 2? I move out. I transfer full ownership to you, in exchange for the purchase of a smaller home in my name and a monthly stipend from the equity difference. And option 3? We try again. With clear boundaries, expectations, and regular family counseling, Amanda agrees to stop making unilateral decisions about the property. No more renovation without discussion. No more exclusion from family gatherings. No more treating me like an inconvenient house guest. Jack set the papers down, looking genuinely pained. These are all so formal, like business transactions. Because informal arrangements haven't worked, I said gently. We need clarity and accountability. All 3 options can lead to us rebuilding our relationship as father and son, but that's separate from the practical matter of our living situation. The door opened without a knock, and Amanda stood there, her makeup slightly smudged, her composure noticeably fractured. The guests are leaving, she said tightly. Thanks to your dramatic scene. Amanda, Jack warned, his tone firmer than I'd heard him use with her before. This isn't the time. When is the time? She demanded. When your father has completely ruined our social standing. When he's turned everyone against me with his selective storytelling. The truth isn't selective, I said, keeping my voice measured. I shared facts tonight, not interpretations. Facts? She scoffed. Like the fact that this house was falling apart before we moved in? That the plumbing leaked, the electrical was outdated, and the kitchen looked like it was from the 70s? The fact that we've put thousands of dollars into improvements that increased the property value substantially. Improvements I never asked for, I countered. Changes made without my input or consent, in a home that is legally 70% mine. Her eyes narrowed. So that's what this is about? Money? After everything we've done for you? Amanda, Jack interjected. That's enough. Dad has been showing us the legal documents he's prepared with his attorney. We have decisions to make about how to move forward. Legal documents? She grabbed the papers from his hand, scanning them quickly. Her face paled, then flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't seriously be considering these options. This is our home now. It's my father's home, Jack said quietly. We're living here as guests, regardless of my partial ownership. We seem to have forgotten that fundamental truth. Amanda stared at him as if seeing a stranger. You're taking his side? After everything we've built together? I'm trying to find a path forward that respects everyone, Jack replied, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. Dad has outlined 3 reasonable options. We should discuss them calmly. There's nothing to discuss, she snapped, throwing the papers onto the desk. He can't force us to leave. He's just trying to manipulate you with guilt. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure with effort. Amanda, I understand you're upset. Tonight has been difficult for everyone. But these documents aren't about manipulation. They're about finding a solution that allows all of us to move forward with dignity. Dignity? She repeated incredulously. You humiliated me in front of my friends and family. Even my grandfather turned against me. Your grandfather recognized disrespect when he saw it, I said. As did everyone else at that table. The question now is whether you can recognize it too. She turned to Jack, her expression hardening. I want him out of this house. Tonight. Jack shook his head slowly. That's not happening, Amanda. This is Dad's home. If anyone leaves tonight, it should be us. Her mouth opened in shock. What? I've been blind to what's been happening, Jack continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. I've allowed you to gradually push my father out of his own home. I've stood by while you removed my mother's photographs, rearranged rooms without asking, excluded him from gatherings, and apparently plotted to have him declared incompetent. That was a contingency plan, she protested, in case his health declined. It was a strategy, Jack corrected her. Part of a larger pattern I've been ignoring, because it was easier than confronting the truth. Amanda's face crumpled suddenly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I just wanted a home of our own, she whispered. Somewhere we could build our future, without living in the shadow of your past. Is that so terrible? The vulnerability in her voice seemed to soften Jack slightly. He reached for her hand, which she initially withdrew before reluctantly allowing him to take it. Wanting our own home isn't terrible, he said gently. But the way we've gone about it was wrong. We should have been honest with Dad and with each other about what we wanted and needed. I cleared my throat, drawing their attention back to me. I think we all need time to process what's happened tonight. Amanda, Jack, why don't you stay with your parents for a few days while we consider these options? When emotions aren't so raw, we can meet again with clearer heads. Amanda looked like she might argue but then nodded stiffly. Fine. I'll pack an overnight bag. After she left the room, Jack turned to me, his expression pained. I'm sorry, Dad. Truly sorry. I know, son. And I did know. Despite everything, I believe Jack's remorse was genuine. We'll find a way through this. He nodded, standing to follow his wife. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, dinner was delicious. Mom would have been proud. The simple acknowledgement connecting my efforts to Laura's memory nearly undid me. I managed a tight nod, not trusting my voice. After they left to pack, I returned to the dining room. The abandoned meal sat in eerie silence, candles still flickering, food cooling on expensive china plates. I began clearing dishes mechanically, finding comfort in the routine task. A throat cleared behind me. I turned to find Amanda's grandfather still seated at the far end of the table. May I help? He asked, rising with the dignity of his 87 years. Thank you, but that's not necessary, I assured him. Shouldn't you be leaving with your family? He shook his head. My daughter and son-in-law are discussing matters with Amanda. They'll return for me shortly. He picked up a serving dish despite my protest. I'm old, not helpless. I can carry a bowl. We worked in companionable silence for several minutes, clearing the worst of the mess. My granddaughter has always been headstrong, he finally said, determined to shape the world to her vision. Usually, that served her well, but sometimes she forgets others have visions of their own. I finished for him. He nodded, a sad smile lifting the corners of his mouth. Exactly so. For what it's worth, I believe she can learn from this, though the lesson may take time to sink in. I hope you're right, I replied. For all our sakes. The week following, Amanda's disastrous birthday dinner passed in blessed quiet. Jack called daily, brief conversations that carefully avoided the central questions of our future living arrangements. Amanda's parents invited me to dinner, an unexpected gesture that I accepted with cautious optimism. The meal was awkward but civil, focusing on neutral topics while acknowledging that difficult decisions lay ahead for our blended family. 10 days after the confrontation, we gathered in my living room: Jack, Amanda, myself, and our respective attorneys. The formality felt excessive but necessary given the legal and financial implications of our options. Amanda had traded her usual confident demeanor for a subdued seriousness. Jack sat beside her, not quite touching but clearly united in having reached some private understanding. My attorney, Susan Clark, had been Laura's college roommate and our family lawyer for decades. Her presence gave me strength. Thank you all for meeting today, Susan began. Randy has outlined 3 potential paths forward, and I understand you've had time to consider them. Jack nodded. We have. Before we discuss specifics, Amanda has something she'd like to say. All eyes turned to my daughter-in-law, who straightened her shoulders and met my gaze directly for perhaps the first time in months. Randy, she began, her voice steady despite obvious tension, I want to apologize for my behavior, not just at the dinner but throughout our time living together. I've been disrespectful of your home, your boundaries, and your position as both homeowner and family elder. The prepared nature of the statement was evident, but the sincerity behind it seemed genuine enough. My grandfather helped me see how my actions appeared to others, she continued. I convinced myself I was improving things, modernizing the house, helping you adapt to current styles. I told myself any resistance was just stubbornness or inability to change. She paused, seeming to move from rehearsed words to more spontaneous ones. The truth is, I was impatient. I wanted our own home, designed to our tastes, without the constant reminders of Laura and your history together. Instead of being honest about that, I tried to gradually transform your home into mine. That was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. I nodded, appreciating the apology while recognizing it didn't magically solve our fundamental incompatibility as housemates. Thank you, Amanda. I accept your apology. She visibly relaxed, though tension remained in her posture. I also want to clarify about the guardianship document. It was never meant to be implemented immediately. I was researching options in case your health declined significantly in the future. The draft was preliminary and inappropriate, and I should never have considered such steps without your involvement. This explanation aligned with what Jack had told me privately, that Amanda had a tendency to over-prepare for contingencies, sometimes creating solutions for problems that didn't yet exist. While the document had been a shocking breach of trust, I could at least partially understand the rationale. As for the remortgage, she continued, that was a serious mistake. I convinced Jack we could generate significant income through my business venture, enough to quickly repay the loan and eventually buy our own property. When the business failed, I was too embarrassed to admit the financial situation, so I pushed harder for renovations to justify the expenditure. Jack placed his hand over hers. We should have been transparent from the beginning. The decisions were made jointly, and we both bear responsibility. Susan cleared her throat. Now that these acknowledgments have been made, let's discuss the practical matter of living arrangements. Randy has proposed 3 options. Have you reached a decision about your preference? Amanda and Jack exchanged glances before Jack spoke. We've given this considerable thought. While option 3, continuing to live together with clearer boundaries, is tempting from a financial perspective, we believe option 1 is healthiest for everyone. Option 1. They would move out within 30 days, and I would buy back Jack's 30% ownership. We've found a townhouse about 15 minutes from here, Jack continued. It's smaller but well within our budget, especially with the equity from my portion of this house. It would give everyone the fresh start and personal space we need. I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that they'd chosen the option I privately preferred, sadness at the partial dissolution of our family unit, hope that separate homes might actually improve our relationships. I think that's a wise decision, I said carefully. The proximity means we can still see each other regularly, but everyone has their own domain. Amanda nodded. My parents have offered to help with the down payment as well, so the transition should be smooth. The attorneys took over, discussing timelines, property assessments, and transfer procedures. I listened with half an attention, watching my son and his wife instead. They seemed different somehow, more unified yet more independent, as if the crisis had forced a kind of growth neither had anticipated. When the lawyers finished their discussion, we all stood to say our goodbyes. Amanda hesitated, then stepped forward to embrace me briefly. I am sorry, Randy, she whispered. I hope we can rebuild what I damaged. Family is worth rebuilding, I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of the sentiment. The following month passed in a flurry of activity. Property assessments, financial negotiations, packing boxes. Jack and Amanda found unexpected joy in selecting furniture for their new home items that reflected their shared tastes rather than compromises with mine. I helped where I could, offering tools and labor for moving day while respecting their ownership of the process. 3 days before they were scheduled to move, Jack asked me to walk through the house with him. I want to make sure we're not taking anything that holds special meaning for you, he explained as we moved from room to room. In Amanda's zealous redecorating, many of Laura's touches had been erased, but Jack was making a genuine effort to identify and preserve what remained. He paused in front of a built-in bookcase in the living room. Remember when we built this together? I must have been about 14. I nodded, running my hand along the oak shelving. You were so proud of learning to use the router for the decorative edging. I still have the scar, he chuckled, showing me a thin white line on his thumb. Mom was furious with you for letting me use power tools. She got over it when she saw how beautiful the finished product was, I reminded him. And how carefully you worked after that little accident. We continued through the house, memories surfacing with each familiar corner. In the kitchen, now restored to a compromise between Amanda's modern aesthetic and my traditional preferences, Jack paused again. I've been thinking a lot about how things went so wrong, he said quietly. I let myself be caught between loyalties instead of finding solutions that honored everyone. I failed both of you by trying to please everyone and ultimately pleasing no one. We all contributed to the situation, I acknowledged. I retreated instead of communicating clearly when problems first arose. Still, Jack insisted, I want you to know that this house, what you and Mom built here, it matters to me. I lost sight of that for a while, but I never stopped valuing it. On moving day, Amanda surprised me by asking if certain items of Laura's photographs and mementos I'd thought long abandoned to the attic might be displayed again after they left. The house should reflect your history, she said. I was wrong to try erasing that. By evening, the moving truck had departed, and the house felt eerily quiet. I wandered from room to room, adjusting to the emptier spaces, the absence of Jack's booming laugh and Amanda's constant activity. There was sadness in the silence, but also a spreading sense of peace. This was my home again, not a battleground of competing visions, but a sanctuary where memories could breathe freely. The following Sunday, I invited Jack, Amanda, Scott, and his wife, and Amanda's parents for dinner. I spent the day cooking, not with the desperate need to please that had driven my birthday preparations, but with the simple joy of sharing food with family. When everyone had arrived, I asked them to gather in the living room before the meal. Jack looked nervous, perhaps expecting another confrontation, but I simply raised my glass. To new beginnings, I said simply, and to the wisdom that sometimes comes only after difficulty. The tension visibly left the room as glasses clinked together. Amanda's mother caught my eye across the circle, mouthing a silent thank you for the gesture of reconciliation. Dinner was relaxed in a way our shared meals hadn't been for years. Conversation flowed easily, focusing on Jack and Amanda's adventures in setting up their new home, Scott's recent fishing triumph, recipes exchanged between generations. When Amanda complimented my roast, the praise felt genuine rather than perfunctory. After dessert, as we lingered around the table with coffee, Amanda's father cleared his throat. I want to acknowledge something, he said, looking directly at me. Families aren't always easy. Blending lives and expectations can create friction even with the best intentions. What I've seen tonight gives me hope that difficult lessons can lead to stronger bonds if everyone is willing to learn and grow. Jack raised his coffee cup. To learning the hard way, he offered with a self-deprecating smile. And to remembering what truly matters, Amanda added softly. Later, as I walked them to their car, Jack hung back for a moment. Dad, I've been meaning to ask, what exactly did you do that night? When Amanda told you to leave the table and you went to your office? I smiled, remembering the calm certainty that had replaced my initial humiliation. I decided to stop accepting disrespect as normal. I chose to value myself enough to establish boundaries, even when that meant potential conflict. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stand in our truth and let others decide how they'll respond to it. Jack nodded slowly. I think that's a lesson I needed to learn too. In the months that followed, our family found a new equilibrium. Sunday dinners became a regular tradition, rotating between our homes. Jack and I resumed father-son fishing trips that had fallen by the wayside during the conflict. Amanda and I developed a cautious friendship based on mutual respect rather than the forced intimacy that had created so much tension. The house gradually returned to feeling like home. Laura's photographs reappeared on walls and shelves. The garden began to resemble her original vision again, though I incorporated some of Amanda's more practical suggestions about maintenance. Some of the modern touches remained a useful reminder that growth requires adaptation, not rigid attachment to the past. One evening, as I sat on the back patio watching the sunset, I felt Laura's presence particularly strongly. Not in a supernatural way, but in the profound sense that her wisdom continued to guide me. We did good, didn't we? I murmured to the fading light. Built something worth fighting for. The gentle breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead, her favorite tree, and I smiled, taking it as agreement. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took your kindness for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most, but those boundaries can ultimately lead to healthier relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more reflections on family, respect, and the courage to speak your truth. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm in difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the strength to honor your own worth, even when those closest to you have temporarily forgotten it.